Achievement Program, where he taught as well. And he also mentored summer interns at Park Davis. This led him to teach at Hope College and at Grand Valley State University. He also conducted undergraduate research in organic chemistry and peptide chemistry. He moved to Massachusetts for 1 year, and he taught at Amherst College. Interestingly enough, there was another link with exemplary athletic performance. While he was there, the women's hockey team won the Division III National Hockey Championship. So I ask you, is it significant that 5 of those student athletes on the roster were enrolled in his organic chemistry course? Is there a link there? Wally returned to Holland, resumed teaching at Hope College until his retirement in 2016. Since then, he's been a very active HASP member, and today he will discuss some very interesting facts about cyanobacteria and blue-green algae. Without further ado, I introduce Wally Fu.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis, for a wonderful introduction. As far as I know, athletic achievement is not my strength, but everywhere I went seemed to be something happening. I went to Marquette, they won the NIT, and then later on they won the NCAA. It was after I graduated. And then when I went to Michigan here to work for Park Davis, we have a national championship at University of Michigan. When I was in North Carolina, Michael Jordan was there. They won several championships, followed with Duke, NC State. So I guess success follows me, or I'm following success. Anyway, I want to tell you something that I know that I've been researching, and this is a good time for us to discuss a topic which is still in the formative stage of my thinking, because I notice things in my own observations of events that there might be some relationship of what we've been exposed to that bringing about diseases that we have to deal with. And this is the topic of toxic algae blooms. In this introductory photo is courtesy of Wood TV, taken a few years back. It shows the entrance of the Holland State Park. You can see the algae in the water. So that's a fairly common problem. I guess I will have to use the clicker to advance the slide. It's not doing it. I'm gonna have to turn it on.
Nope. We got it.
Oh, you got to exit. Okay.
Try.
All right.
No, try it right there.
Try right there.
Oh, no, that's the this. Doesn't like it. Okay, just try this.
Okay. Maybe, Amy, you can tell me people online whether they have actually watched the 2 videos. I want to give a little hands up if you have watched the 2 videos we sent out. Everybody, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of. So many of us did not see or did not receive the email or did not open the email. Just want to give you a heads up about what these are. And since there are people who did not see it, it'll be easier if I go through the 2 short videos. So we can right now. I'm going to play this video. Play.
Right now, finding a cure for Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and Parkinson's. Pharmaceutical companies are failing us. Science is failing us. The system and the process that we're using is failing us. We started thinking there's got to be a better way.
What we've done here is we've created a virtual pharmaceutical firm. I mean, we're frankly in a cabin here. Our laboratory is cabin-based, okay? We have not invested in brick and mortar.
We have a consortium of more than 50 scientists around the world, and each of them are top in their fields. These are the best of the best. We have literally told them to stop what you're doing and come and help us solve neurodegenerative disease.
That's what this place is about. A different place, a way to think different thoughts with the smartest people I can find on this planet to come up with innovative new drugs to treat our most serious illnesses. My name is Paul Allen Cox. I'm Executive Director of the Brain Chemistry Labs in Jackson, Wyoming. I go to indigenous peoples. I study both their traditional healing systems, but I also study different patterns of disease. And that's what led us into our current work now on ALS and Alzheimer's disease. When my mother passed away from breast cancer in 1983, I got a year to go with my family to a remote island in Samoa where I apprenticed with native healers. I failed fast. I discovered that the people did not even have a word in their language for cancer. But when the National Cancer Institute asked me to start looking for something that could treat HIV/AIDS, we found this remarkable bark of this tree that the healers were using to treat hepatitis, and we discovered a new drug for HIV. So I started thinking, what could I do? What other sort of indication could I look at where there's sort of hopelessness, no good drugs? That led me straight into ALS and Alzheimer's disease. Guam is an island in the South Pacific. It changed hands during World War II. The Chamorro people, the indigenous people, were under famine conditions prior to the United States taking it back from Japan.
What's unique about the Chamorro people, besides their isolation, they eat bats, they eat flying foxes. And this is a unique, it's not completely unique, but it has become part of their cultural identity. We learned that the Chamorro people have this devastating disease, which has aspects of ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, it had aspects of Alzheimer's, and it has aspects of Parkinson's disease, and many times all in a single individual.
I was sitting on the beach in Samoa thinking about this unusual disease among the Chamorro people, which again looks sometimes like ALS, sometimes like Parkinson's, sometimes like Alzheimer's. I was trying to figure out how those people get enough of a dose to cause a disease, and suddenly I realized, wait, maybe it's the consumption of the flying foxes that cause this illness. So that was the first real sort of flash of I guess, insight.
This intrigued us of whether the bats themselves could be part of this unique disease that they have known as ALS-PDC.
We realized here's a big piece of the puzzle that's been missed. And then we discovered that the flying foxes feed on the fleshy covering of cycad seeds, and that way absorb this toxin from the cycads. Cycad seeds have a variety of different toxic substances. So we decided first to look at this weird amino acid, BMAA.
I remember putting in the sample and saw this little peak come up and realized that the bats had this toxin present in their tissue. And I was so excited. It was 2 in the morning and I was thinking, do I call Dr. Cox or not?
The phone rang 2 in the morning. I picked it up in the first ring. She said, we got it. I said, you're kidding? She said, no, I can see the peak as clear as anything. Here's this peak of BMAA from this flying fox tissue. So it was really the bats that led us to this toxin.
Cycads are very old organisms. They were around when the dinosaurs were around. But what's really intriguing about cycads is they have these specialized roots, and most roots grow into the ground and down. What these ones do is they grow up. And within these roots, there is a bacteria that lives in specialized cells that the cycad makes in its roots. And these photosynthetic bacteria, known as cyanobacteria, move in. We wondered if it wasn't cyanobacteria itself that produced the toxin.
There's fossils of cyanobacteria that date back to 3.4 billion years ago. They created the oxygen atmosphere of this planet. So they're not our enemies. On the other hand, they produce some toxic substances, including this one, BMAA.
Cyanobacteria is ubiquitous. It's found in fresh water, it's found in salt water, it's found in ice cores, it brings the color of Yellowstone National Park. And if this toxin is found in the larger cyanobacteria and is found worldwide in all these places, that everybody could be exposed to it. The Chamorro people had a very high exposure, but it certainly is possible that the rest of us had some small, lower concentration of exposure no matter where we live in the world.
So suddenly the picture starts getting much more complex, because we're not talking about a single tribal disease among a remote island population. We're talking about people that live in Sweden along the Baltic. We're talking about Toledo, Ohio. You could be down sitting along the St. Lucie River coming out of Lake Okeechobee in Florida and be exposed to that exact same toxin. That was terrifying to us. I started thinking, well, I've been to all the places in the world that have an elevated incidence of ALS and Alzheimer's. I wonder if there's anywhere where they don't have it at all. And this took me to Ogimi on the northern tip of Okinawa, where they have no record of ALS, no record of Alzheimer's, no record of Parkinson's. And we were astonished to discover their diet is rich in L-serine. They get it from the tofu they eat, they get it from the seaweeds, other plants. To put this in perspective, the average American gets about 3 grams of L-serine in their diet a day. The average resident of that village gets 10 to 12 grams, 4 times the amount.
Maybe if you increase the concentration of serine in your diet relative to the BMAA or to other amino acids in your diet, that you could save neurons from death. What if serine all by itself can protect us from these neurodegenerative diseases?
I hate to get my hopes up, but I'll tell you, if it really does work, if we can really slow both ALS and Alzheimer's through high doses of L-serine, that'd be terrific, because this stuff is cheap. I mean, you can buy it off the internet at 30 bucks a kilogram, you know? It's abundant. If we're successful using a non-toxic molecule to reduce risk of protein misfolding and hence risk of Alzheimer's disease, we just think we should treat everybody, whether they show any signs of Alzheimer's or not. What's to lose? You know, science is such a powerful way of understanding the universe. It's a terrific way of viewing the world. But when we couple modern science with indigenous knowledge that goes back, in some cases, hundreds or even thousands of years, combining those two results in a very powerful way of discovering new drugs.
I think brain chemistry labs can change the world. I think if we're right, and this is an if, we still have a lot of work to do, but if we're right, we can prevent neurodegenerative disease.
Our sole mission here is to change patient outcomes. And we want to change it in the lifetime of current patients. We don't want them waiting 30, 40, 50 years. We want to change outcomes now. I was so excited this afternoon. I got word from Dartmouth that they dosed the first ALS patient. 50 people. And when you see the patients and the agony they and their families face with these diseases, to think that we've even got a small chance of treating this, that's a big payoff for us. I've told the team, you know, that if we actually succeed in getting one of these drugs licensed by the FDA, well, we're going to take the day off and go ski the powder. And then the following day, we'll be right back here working on the next disease.
Well, let's go to the next one, which is different than the disease, is talk about people actually eating food made from cyanobacteria. Where is that other one? Second tab. I can't see the mouse. Okay. Hello? All right, you guys saw that. And by the way, there are other products made from cyanobacteria that we have seen it on TV advertised. AG1, which is a green powder that you can mix in your water. You can drink that stuff. I don't think you should drink that stuff if you can avoid it. First of all, you can save some money. Secondly, you can avoid this exposure to possible cyanobacteria, because AG1 and green products that say high protein products usually are coming from cyanobacteria. Therefore, you should avoid taking those. Now let's get back to my algae bloom slide. Now we're going to go into some interesting science stuff. Yeah.
You were doing.
Just not quite fast enough. Okay, thank you. Well, cyanobacteria, as mentioned by Paul Cox, is a very old organism that lived, 3 billion years ago. And they are responsible for enriching the atmospheric oxygen to the point that we as human or animals can survive. Therefore, it is a beneficial cyanobacteria. However, Paul Cox also said it is producing some toxins. The BMAA he talked about as a toxin is a secondary amino acids. Secondary amino acids are very different than primary amino acids. And I will talk about that later on. But right now, you should understand secondary amino acids are most likely causing inflammation and oxidative processes in the human body. Are we to talk about this? And because of the elevation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, cyanobacteria naturally start to flourish in order to bring the carbon dioxide level back down and generating oxygen for people like us to survive with. And in so doing, you need warm temperature, which is right now we have global warming. You need a lot of nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen that's present because we're doing a lot of farming. We're feeding 7 billion people on Earth. So there's a lot of fertilizer being used. And the the carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere is right now over 400 ppm. You can see in the next two slides. Okay, I want to first go on to talk about the BMAA level. Paul Cox did not mention what the BMAA level is all about and point out that based on the report in the Fortune magazine, it said the cyanobacteria itself contains only 0.3 parts, so it's very low level. But by the time I get into the cycase seeds, it's 120 some times greater. So now it becomes 37 parts. And by the time the flying foxes ate the cycase seeds, the flesh of the flying foxes, they contain 3,500 parts of BMAA. And the kimono native eating it would magnify that another 100 times. So now those are the people coming down with the ALS and the Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease like. So cycate tree is a tropical tree and the seeds are the exoseeds. That means the seeds are on the outside, not on the inside part. So this is what a tree look like a palm tree. Okay, now here is the carbon dioxide level of the last 150 years or so, 200 years or so. You can see that during the 1700s, there was hardly any problem with carbon dioxide level. It was 280 parts per million. But by 2017, it was over 400 parts per million. And it has continued to increase. If you look at the line here, the green line, the blue line is the one that it shows you that it is increasing. This is 400 level here, right here. This is 2017, and we have been exceeding that in the last 3-4 years. And now cyanobacteria is becoming more active because there's a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for them to bring it in to convert to oxygen. So cyanobacteria is doing its job. The carbon dioxide increases. Why they increase? Because we have nitrogen fertilizers we're making. for those of you who understand the chemistry behind it, is because in the 1920s, we started industrializing by producing nitrogen fertilizer from nitrogen in the atmosphere. And that allowed us to produce enough food to feed the world. Also, we produce a lot of carbon dioxide in the manufacturing of cement and concrete. And because of the bigger increase of population, we're producing more carbon dioxide and the anthropogenic activities from human, right? And population increase, it just put more stress on the earth. And let's look at some of the sports. Remember, this lady talked about cyanobacteria is found in fresh water, salt water, ice. So therefore, you look at the athletes who are exposed to these things might get higher incidence of Alzheimer's disease. So I went and searched. And among football players, I'm talking about American football now. This is there's three times greater incidence of Alzheimer's among football athletes. Even worse, soccer players, 6.5 to 18 times. There's about 3 or 4 studies. And then among skiers in Sweden, there's 4 times higher than normal population. So you can look at that. So this young lady's comment about ice, water, doesn't matter fresh or salt water, they would cause the same problems. Now let's look at some of our famous athletes. You heard of Lou Gehrig, died at a fairly young age. And Stephen Hawkins died at a much later age, 76. He never played sports, but then he died from similar disease. Among NFL football players, you guys heard of the White Clock, the catch, the guy who caught the pass from Montana, Joe Montana, threw him the pass at the end zone, they caught it, they won the Super Bowl game. He died at 61. Matt Hazeltine, Bob Waters, and O.J. Brigham's were 3 players at the San Francisco with the 49ers. And they were probably exposed to certain toxins during their career when they were still playing football. So all 3 of these people died from Lou Gehrig's disease. And then Glenn Montgomery, Orlando Thomas, and Kevin Turner, they also have passed away. Those guys passed away even at a younger age. But then among the living, as far as I remember, it's about two weeks ago, I checked it, and Steve Gleason, Tim Shaw, and Tim Green are still alive. Those were very, very, strong athletes at one time. So therefore, the claim at that time on 60 Minutes was that milorganite may be the cause of the disease. But there was no follow-up on that study. By the way, milorganite is the fertilizer sold for many people's home use. And at that time, it was used in 49ers football field. Milorganite is made from the municipal sewage waste, including the slaughterhouse waste. Therefore, animal parts and bone meals and everything is mixed in there. So it's possible that that might be part of the reasons. But just like people talk about Knox gelatin may be responsible for prion disease. Those are diseases of nervous system as well. And that's because Knox gelatin is made from animal hoofs and bones and cartilages. Yes, sir.
When I was a kid, you pick up milorganite at almost any garden center. The only thing they had a warning on it was that it should not be used for edible vegetables, only in flower gardens.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for clarifying. Yeah. So that perhaps these athletes might have been, getting exposed. Yes.
On grass, things like that, if you're playing on grass.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Lee. Anyway, how prevalent are cyanobacteria? They're everywhere. There's no way we can avoid it. Well, which countries seem to have the most incidence of diseases related to cyanobacteria? So I tabulated 40 countries. This is based on MS disease. Okay, MS is also a central nervous disease. So among those countries, the number one is Finland. The incidence of death is 65.7 per 100,000 population. If you look down on this table here, you see number 13, Myanmar, is the only one in there. There was an outbreak among the 20 countries. Finland, Kuwait, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Britain, they are all fairly high. And you look around, Finland is a Western civilization country, Kuwait is Midwestern country, Turkey, Midwestern country, Saudi, Midwestern, British, European country, Tunisia is probably Middle Eastern country, Libya, Middle Eastern, United States, Western country, Syria, Middle Eastern country. You can see except Myanmar is in Asia. And you guys saw the film, they make spirulina. So kind of expected that, don't we? Let's go to the next page, the next 20 countries. There's Norway, Canada, Algeria. All of these are Western civilization countries or Middle Eastern countries. Is there something they ate or is there something they live with that caused the problem? Well, most of those countries have very closed inland sea. For example, Finland is in the dead end of the Baltic Sea, where the Russians dumped the waste right down from St. Petersburg. So that part of the Baltic Sea, I heard, was very polluted. They have algae bloom to the point that ships could not move out because the propellers got caught on it, you know. So overall, you can see that there might be some reason. Here I summarize what my thinking is that because of these nations are into eating products that might be carrier of these, and we, like the Komodo natives in Guam that was on the top of the human food chain and started absorbing us by eating the species that are contaminated. Could be sheep, could be goats, could be cows, could be deer, could be antelope, anything that you will consume. And then, of course, Paul Cox talked about consuming L-serine. L-serine is from edamame or soybean. So if you eat that kind of stuff, maybe that will reduce it. And later on, I will show you why I think there might be some relationship there. Now I'm going to shift gear to another country, Asia, in China. China in 2008 decided to clean out the area for the 2008 Olympics. So they drag the rivers and lakes to clean them out, and they piled the green slime from the bottom of the lake to the shore, and then they trucked them away. But you can see the people were playing in it because the government told them, oh, it's safe. So you believe that? You're putting that into your own hands. Now here I have something else I want to share with you is on Alzheimer's and dementia death rate by country. So if I click this one, you will see a map showing you what the world is like. This is, you can see that countries like China is moderately low, and the gray one like Russia and India is almost non-existing. The red one are high. You look at that map, Canada and USA are red, Australia, New Zealand are red, A lot of the Middle Eastern countries are red, and many of the Western countries, especially, the Baltic European countries are red. Therefore, they have a higher incidence of the Alzheimer's and dementia. You can go in there and call up any other diseases if you want to. You can go in there, look for alcoholism, which I think Russia will be on the top. You can look at asthma, you can look at all sorts of things, suicide, a different type of these problems that you can see, tuberculosis, which probably is not going to be the United States, will be a third world country. So this is a good place to check it out. So now we're going to go down to see some of the toxins that are found in cyanobacteria. Some of these names are very interesting. Saxitoxin is a carbamate nerve poison. A carbamate is very common things that we guys use at home for controlling insects in your vegetable gardens. For example, you use 7 insecticide to control, worms and so forth. And that is a carbamate insecticide. Many of the bed bugs insecticides used in hotels, but now have been outlawed, are again a carbamate insecticide. And the LD50, LD stands for lethal dose 50, that means 50% will be killed if you put that amount on. That would be 9 micrograms per kilogram or parts per billion. So saxitoxin is a fairly toxic material, 9 microgram or 9 parts per billion. Let's look at the relationship. What is parts per billion? Let's say you have a big tank car and you have a whole tank car of ethanol, which is alcohol, and you put in 1 shot glass of water in there. That is probably about 10 parts per billion. So that's how much there is. It's that small amount in the presence of the human body will kill you. Guanotoxin is an organophosphate. So anything to do with phosphate, which means this agricultural runoff would provide the phosphate for this to form. And that is a little bit less toxic. It's 20 parts per million to kill 50% of the population. And then the third one is called microcystine, LR. That is not as bad as 50 parts per billion, but it's still fairly toxic. Anatoxin is an aminoketone, which is a very strange looking molecule. It's fairly common. It's 200 to 250 parts per billion to kill 50% of the population. Noradrenaline is another peptide material that is just as bad as microcystine. And then for comparison, cobra toxin. If you spit, got hit by a cobra spit, and it's 20 parts per billion, it can kill 50% of the population. Cyanide, which is something that is known to kill people with cyanide. That's what Hitler did, and that toxicity is 1520 parts per million. So that's not as toxic, but it still can kill. Now, this is taken from Florida Gulf Coast University, the information. Now let's switch over to a little bit of chemistry here. We have 3 kinds of amines I'm looking at. The first one on the left here has 1 nitrogen attached to 2 hydrogens and a CH3, which is called a methyl group. It's called methylamine. That's called a primary amine. That is used to make the MIC gas that killed a bunch of Indians in Bhopal, India, 39 years ago. Dimethylamine is the one in the middle. That one has two methyl groups and one hydrogen on the nitrogen. So this one here is called a secondary amine. There's no commercial insecticide using secondary amines. When I was working in industry, I was told that never do any preparation of secondary amine carbamates. It's because these secondary amines are carcinogenic. Now I know why. And then the last one on the right is a nitrogen containing 3 methyl groups. This is called a trimethylamine or a tertiary amine. Now, interesting thing about these 3 kinds of amines is that primary amine and tertiary amine will form reactive oxidative material with nitrogen oxide, NO, or nitric oxide, to form nitrosyl amines, but they are not stable. They are just so transient they will fall apart very quickly. But secondary amine will form a nitrosyl amine. You can actually go to the chemical clearinghouse and buy these compounds. They have the melting point, boiling point, everything else in there, so therefore a stable material. And those things will cause a lot of damage in the human body if it is ingested. Now we talk about amino acid. Amino acid is like BMAA we talked about earlier from Paul Cox's discussion. You got an amine on the left-hand side of this molecule. This amine is a primary amine because it has 2 hydrogens. It has a carboxy group on the right-hand side. That's called the acid. And then there's an R group in the middle here. And because this carbon here is asymmetric, so you have a left-handed type of amino acid or right-handed type of amino acid. And only one of those will work in the human body for, biological functions. The amine on this side is balanced by the acid on the other side. So therefore, amino acids are always fairly neutral. It's usually a solid. And there are very few amino acids that are, okay, here's the next slide I want to show us. There are 20 proteinogenic amino acids. That means these are the 20 amino acids that we have in our human body. It makes up our hair, our fingernail, our toenails, all the things that in the human body, your protein that you consume is made out of these amino acids. And I have an asterisk on 9 of those. Those are called the essential amino acids. There's got one here, histidine, phenylalanine. Okay, on the left-hand side, there's dark blue and light blue. That means they're slightly basic. For example, arginine has a guanidine group hanging here. The guanidine is slightly basic. Lysine has got an amine group hanging there as basic. So all of these are basic. And then on the right-hand side, the light pink color is slightly basic, and then 2 other ones, aspartic acid and glutamic acid, are acidic amino acids because they have they have 2 carboxy groups. There's one here for aspartic acid. For glutamic acid, there's 1 carboxy group here and 1 carboxy group here. Therefore, those are acidic amino acids. Of those amino acids, there are 3 that are secondary amino acids. One is called proline, which is essential, and tryptophan, which is also essential, and histamine, also essential. These are amino acids that we have to take by eating it in order to produce the other 11. So total, our body only needs 9 to make us survive and live, because our body can convert the 9 into the other 11, and then they can build up in different forms to generate the enzymes and different special things in the body that can do fancy things for you, like regulating your blood sugar, insulin, or providing control of iron in your body so that you're not anemic. Ferritin, it's got a lot of these humongous protein structure. And now the secondary amines is because if you look at the structure here, there's nitrogen with one hydrogen. Here's another one, nitrogen with one hydrogen. This is in tryptophan. And then in histidine, there's also a nitrogen with one hydrogen. So those are secondary amines. Now, secondary amines will form nitrosamines. Those are cancer-causing agents. The acidic human stomach is a great reactor to do a reaction called nitrosamine reaction. And that's a very common thing. For example, you guys drive by on the north side of Holland here. There's a street not far away from Beechwood Inn. It's called aniline or aniline. That's a primary amine. You can form a nitrosamine of aniline, and you can do things with this and convert it to other compounds. Same thing with nitrosodimethylamine, which is something that you guys might have heard. They call it NDMA, or sometimes other people call it NDA. NDA is non-disclosure agreement, right? While nitrosodimethylamine is actually the real acronym for it. Okay, this compound is stable, and you can buy it. They are in some of the drugs that we take. For example, it is present in, I'm going to go to the next slide to show you. This is nitrosodimethylamine. It's derived from secondary amine. This one is in rocket fuel. Dimethylhydrazine is a rocket fuel. If it is in complete combustion, it forms nitrosamine, and that's a cancer-causing agent. Because of that, maybe that's why Florida has drinking water allowance of 70 parts per million for the nitrosodimethylamine, why the state of Massachusetts and the state of California has a limit of 1 ppm. So it's about 70 times higher in Florida. It's because, you know, a rocket launch for the last 50, 60 years, we've been doing this. And of course, some of the drugs we take, Zantac, Cozar, Hyzar, metformin. Another thing is Imodium. These are all products containing the dimethyl group present. So it could release dimethylamine, and then your body would convert it to form the nitrosamine. So those are dangerous materials that you might be consuming if you take these products. Another way to make nitrosamine is start with dimethylamine. The dimethylamine on the right-hand side here, when it reacts with sodium nitrite, which is a preservative. You know, you go to the meat counter to buy preserved meat like sausages or hot dogs and pastrami. Usually they will contain nitrates or nitrites. And those things will react. And with the human saliva, which reduces nitrates to nitrite, this is the NO3 is nitrate, NO2 is nitrite. And then in the presence of a little bit of acid, human stomach is acidic, they give you nitrosodimethylamine. So dimethylamine and consumer products, I already talked about that, Imodium, Zantac, and food additives. They added to certain foods to make it smell like seafood, fresh seafood, because all amines smell like fish. Now, NDMA has been known to cause cancer in many animal tests. They have no study done on human. Is because it's unethical to test it on human. But then it's implied that these things will produce toxic, cancer-causing agents. And that is from a report in 2000, Occupational Environmental Medicine. What are the most deadly toxin made by cyanobacteria? We already saw on the previous slides. The next few slides I show you, now this is getting hairy, but I don't want to go further than that. But important thing is this is microcystine. Microcystine LR has a very interesting amino acid in there. You look at the amino acid, these are the building blocks to make the peptide. Peptide is polyamides. Oh, sorry. If you look at this structure here, I have a bracket showing here. This is a mask structure of N-methylserine. You see that? N-methylserine is a secondary amine. It's almost like serine. Is that actually part of the problem that kill people or maybe doing long-term harm? Because these things in the human stomach will break down, and these fragments is going to migrate in the body to different parts of your organs and store there and then do damage later. The Trojan horse. Here's another. Okay, the function of L-serine. This is an insulation sheath for nerve cells. This is L-serine is participation in the mitochondria to convert fatty material, the triglycerides, to form the myelin sheaths. If you have the N-methylserine, are you actually making that competition going on? They're causing problems. And FDA has actually allowed ALS study for using L-serine, which is what Paul Cox was doing. So this is reaffirming Cox's report. And then the second one, now this time is again, if you look at that, this compound here has that bracket showing you there's an N with a methyl group, CH3 group here. That means it's a secondary amine that form the amide here. And then there's a double bond here. If you add water across it, you end up with the water over here on N-methylthreonine, which is another amino acid that is not natural. It's N-methyl L-serine, threonine. And this thing here may be responsible for other diseases. So I looked under L-threonine's benefits. And this is what I found. Threonine is used to treat various nerve system disorders, including spasticity, multiple sclerosis, familial spastic paralysis, or ALS. Wow. Well, maybe there is a reason that that other toxin made by cyanobacteria is responsible. Again, that might be also a Trojan horse. Spirulina, we talk about spirulina from the slide, so I'm going to skip through this. Now I don't have to say anymore. A recent discovery. This is something that happened since about 1994. Bald eagle was crashing out of the sky in DeGrasse Lake in Arkansas. Anybody know where DeGrasse Lake is? Arkansas? It's a man-made lake. So in the man-made lake, there's a lot of cement. And in making cement, there's always bromine present. A few years later, at Thurman Reservoir, which is between Georgia and South Carolina, greater number of eagles died. It's like several hundred bald eagles died. And then fast forward to 2 years, 3 years ago, the mystery of this death was solved. And I will show you next slide what is happening here. Look at the picture on the right-hand side of the slide. Here they have a magnification of that little spot into that spot, and then they magnify that little spot into this spot. It tells you that this invasive hydrilla was a host to cyanobacteria. The cyanobacteria is laying dormant for millions of years or billions of years, until bromine was detected in the soil. And they take the bromine and convert it to this monster molecule, which is 2 molecules of indole combined, or tryptophan related compounds. And then the fish, the minnows is turtles and snail, and you name it, all these creatures were feeding on this kind of stuff, so they accumulate the toxin. And the coots, or maybe migratory birds even, they will feed on these marine organisms. Eventually they got impaired. And the bald eagle will prey on the coots, because the coots that are impaired the most will be the least likely to fly away from harm. So eagles are not hunters, they are predators. So they come down, they get the weakest animal, they feed on that, and then they develop the disease. And here's a picture of the nerves in the spine and in the brain, and showing that they have little holes in there. And it will turn out that this is what's happening. Tryptophan on the left. Tryptophan is an amino acid, and that thing will grow in plants that will grow very fast, because this is called a growth factor. Tryptophan is a growth factor for plants. Therefore, if you have mushrooms, you can have tryptophan in there, because mushrooms grow like, inches a day. Same thing with these hydrilla, they grow very fast. So it's present. And if it is present, and if the bromine also is present in the water or in the soil under this lake, and it will go through bromination of 2 or 3 different things happening here to form the 2 molecules showing in the middle here. And when they combine, they form a pentabromo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bromine on this molecule. And this is the called ectophonos toxin, eagle killing toxin. And here is it, eagle killing toxin. And interesting thing is that if you understand chemistry, is that the M and M+2, this is in the mass spec study. If you take this molecule, you shoot it through this mass spec analysis, it will tell you that the M and M+2, the ratio, if it is 55 to 45, that means you have 5 bromine in there. If it is 1 bromine, it will be 49 to 51. So with 5 bromines, so they identified that was a very elegant piece of work. So what is contributing to the problem is that the eagle killing the Hydrilla venticillata is the invasive aquatic plant that came from the Indian subcontinent. Somebody back in the 50s or 60s decided to bring a whole shipload to sell in the USA as aquarium plants for people's little fish tanks. Unfortunately, it wasn't received very well, because it just proliferates very fast. So they dumped the entire load before they went back to Sri Lanka. They dumped it in the Gulf Coast somewhere. And therefore, there was a study done by Daniel Weber, who received his master's from a SUNY in Albany. And he said in New York, he discovered that the amount you can see on the map, the little purple dots are where they found this hydrilla that was in the water. Right in the middle of the state is Ithaca, New York, and I was a student there at one time. So I know about the situation already. That's not going to be good. Now, you look back into the same person, and the thesis said the hydrilla situation is worse than you think. Look at the state of Florida. Look at Texas and Louisiana. And look at the whole West Coast, the East Coast. What about the state of Michigan? Well, it's not too bad. It's only up in by Wisconsin border. But Michigan is not too bad, right? So we probably survive okay, you think? Just don't bring a boat from some or the other places. Just don't bring it and put it in your freshwater lake in Michigan. Then you'll be okay. Now, here's one. Michigan has a history of bromine production. Dow Chemical became a successful company because of extraction of bromine from the brine from under the middle of the state. If you look at the map of Michigan, the little white part is called brine. There's sodium bromide that they extracted from the ground, and then they do purification and get the bromine out of there. They were selling bromine back in the 1860s, 1880s. And some of them are into the gray area. The dark gray area is called the saline area. That means there's plenty of brine in it too. Fortunately, Holland, Michigan is still in the freshwater portion. Now let's look at some of these things related to tryptophan. Tryptophan is very dangerous stuff, right? But we take medicine for tryptophan in it. LSD, you guys know about LSD? Timothy Leary here, anybody? LSD is on the left. So that's what LSD looked like. So it's a tryptophan. And in the middle is a serotonin, it's a depressant, right? You guys heard about serotonin reuptake inhibitor for, emotional problems. And then magic mushroom. No wonder, because this is a growth factor. Mushroom is going to love that. They're going to produce this toxin. By the way, if you take this phosphate away, but put a sulfur compound on this carbon here, then you have Imitrex, which is something you take for migraine headache. Tryptophan is an indole, okay? Now let's look at Holland's situation here. Anybody recognize Pine Creek near Vista Park? This is cyanobacteria. Okay, this is a runoff from all the blueberry farms or other agricultural uses. And this is the same from the same spot, but I just pan my camera to the left. You see there's a house sitting here on the side here. I think there's a house right here. Somebody who lived there 30 years ago died from ALS. I happen to know that family. Well, connect the dots. So we know that toxins is everywhere. We can avoid it, but we can reduce the exposure. We should be able to reverse some of the symptoms by taking L-serum. I'm not against taking these supplements, but make sure you take the right stuff, not just take anything. Okay, don't consume the AG1 type of product, because anything made from cyanobacteria is a suspect. So don't risk it. Well, the cyanobacteria toxins accumulate in the food chain. So if your lifestyle is eating food from this source, you're going to end up with more risk. If you like to go hunt and eat a lot of deer, but you don't know where the deer have been, you're going to end up with problems. And this ego killing situation is the same thing. It's a human food chain. If we eat the egos, we're probably going to get sick too. So all these things are causing a lot of problems for the future. Again, in summary, I just want to point out that BMAA is the issue of ALS, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's. And the ego killing disease, again, is a problem at Michigan could be next. So we need to watch out for that kind of problem. Now, this is all a theory or an observation, and I'm saying no, there's always supporting evidence for things that I'm challenging why it is happening. And I'm open to, discussion with people who want to ask more questions. Okay, Don? I have tried.
Hold on, Ron. The people online probably did not hear that. Would you just repeat the question?
The question was, do I take L-lysine? You talk about L-serine. L-serine, okay. L-serine, yes, I have taken L-serine, but I don't take L-serine just by buying the material, because the Paul Cox said it's about $30 a kilo. It's no longer true. It's more like about $100 a kilo now. I eat soybean. I eat tofu. Any of those products will have a lot of L-serine in it. So that helps. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is there any ongoing research right now trying to identify BMAAs in various patients?
I do not know there's any study of patients, but I think it would be interesting to find out if Alzheimer's patients have BMAA in the brain, especially the autopsy study will probably confirm that. I think they should have a control study, the healthy people who died or the Alzheimer's patient who died, and there's a difference in the brain. I don't know if there's any study done.
I don't know either. There's a substantial amount of research being done at the Van Andel Institute on Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and it's quite likely that if there are some post-mortem autopsies done looking for BMA, they would be aware of it. I would think so anyway.
Yeah.
Any other questions? It's interesting how these small molecules can play such an important part in our lives. In the case of these amino acid analogs, these unnatural amino acids, how they can get incorporated into protein synthesis and cause misfolding of proteins.
Exactly.
And that misfolding of proteins is what causes entanglements in the brain. And unfortunately, some neurodegenerative diseases follow from that.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Louis. That's very true. That's misfolding, especially, for example, Parkinson's disease. They talk about beta-synuclein, which is the protein that was in Parkinson's disease. It's that there's about 140 amino acids in a long chain. It's that from 95 down to 140 some. This is heavily populated with proline. And if you look at proline, that's a secondary amine. Those have a tendency to do misfolding, the beta sheets and all this stuff. So maybe that's what is the cause of the Parkinson's disease. I'm not an expert in Parkinson's disease, but yes.
About how long has Alzheimer's been a recognized entity?
Very good. I like that question because I've been thinking about this since I found out about Alzheimer's reported by Alois Alzheimer in Germany. The first patient was 1860s, no, 1880s, I think. And she died about 10 or 12 years later. Her name is Auguste. I forgot her last name, but anyway, she was from an area in Germany, Saxony area. And guess what? I found out that this is where the German bromine industry was started. And Germans were competing against Dow Chemical, try to cut the price to compete against Dow. And Dow was a smart businessman. He went and bought the German stuff at their price, low price, and he turned around, sold it in the US at a higher price, and he made money. And so I said, wow, therefore, maybe bromine has something to do with her Alzheimer's? I don't know. But that's only a conjecture.
I can add a little bit to that. So the German physician researcher, Dr. Alois Alzheimer, he first described this peculiar disease in the year 1906. And it was 4 years later, in 1910, that it was named Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
So that's what happened there. Now, the connection with the German chemical industry is interesting because certainly late 19th century and early 20th, the Germans, they had the, I suspect, the most intensive German or chemical industry in the world.
That's correct.
And if those of you who are native to Holland, you may remember that BASF temporarily had a factory here. They had bought the Holland Chemical and Color Company, as I recall. And the A in BASF stands for aniline, which is the name of the street. So
Right.
the BASF is a German company. They were established 19th century. They were among the first to make synthetic dyes. Aniline is one of them. And there are a lot of brominated products that are made in Germany as well.
That's very true. Yes, I did a lot of bromine chemistry when I was at Park Davis too. So I understand the bromine is such an interesting chemical. It's a gas. Bromine is Br2 for bromine gas. Bromide is Br minus. Sodium bromide is normally that you extract it from the brine from underground. So converting sodium bromide to bromine, you bubble chlorine into it, then you form sodium chloride, releasing the bromine gas. And it's hot, so you're gonna have to trap it. So I guess maybe back in the old days, it's not very efficient in trapping the bromine. So there's some going to be escaping.
I'm no chemist, but I saw metformin up there.
Metformin, yes.
Can you talk about the positives and negatives of metformin? I hear so many stories.
Metformin, yes. Most people take metformin in 500 milligrams. And most people take 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, and then I think that's the max you can take. So you talk about 2 grams of metformin could be consumed in one day by a diabetic patient. And metformin by itself is made from dimethylamine. We're using cyanogen bromide, aminocyanogen. No, it's a molecule that has looked like there's so many nitrogen on there you think might be explosive. Okay, so you have that dimethylamine reacting with that compound to form a guanidine structure, and so the whole thing is, of course, when they break down, it's going to release dimethylamine, and then in the body it can convert to nitrosyl dimethylamine. This is a known process. Chemically, what happen, especially in the human stomach.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
You mentioned a few other compounds that may have NDMA as a contaminant in them.
Yes.
As a chemist, I don't like impurities. I don't like contaminants. However, they exist. Can you give us an idea of the magnitude of contamination? Are we talking about parts per million, parts per billion, something? And it's a range, of course. It's not a number. It's a range.
Okay, the contamination from things like colza, is because of a solvent they use to make the product. The solvent used, you probably will know, is called DMF, dimethylformamide. When that solvent, because it boils at about 140 degrees Celsius, So it's very high boiling material. So it's hard to remove from the product. And if this contamination is high, it will break down to give you dimethylamine. But normally, the standard for a known impurity should be identified, how many percentage it is in there. Usually it's 0.1%. For unknown impurity, anything greater than 0.1% unknown is a reason to reject the batch. This is in the United States, but doesn't apply in India. Come to my next Tuesday's talk about the bottle of lies. We'll talk about that. Yes.
My blood pressure medication was changed to Hyzar,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what it was about.
Hyzar and Kozar are related. Hyzar is a mixture of Kozar and chlorothiazide, which is it helps you to eliminate urine, makes you go to the bathroom more often.
Diuretic.
Diuretic. So therefore, it's the same product, but the diuretic is not part of the impurity that we formed. But the impurity had to come from the Hyzar, Kozar, or the Kozar, because it was made with that solvent. The bad part is that some of the drugs contain dimethylamine in there, and they break down. For example, Zantac. There is a portion of the molecule has possibility of losing dimethylamine because of the reactivity of the molecule. You have to understand the chemistry, how that happens in the human body. It can go through certain oxidative steps and then causing a problem. And Imodium too, same thing. Imodium contains dimethylamide. So those things will break down in the stomach.
Any other questions? Very well then. Join me in
Thank you.
thanking Wally for his presentation today.
Thank you.